Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this workshop as well. We are excited today to dive a bit deeper into the AI models that we developed and how we build our papers. We have again a great lineup of speakers, but you have had the chance already to meet all of them, so we don't need to go again through the introductions. But just for clarification, this workshop is about the development of the AI models and explainability. So it's really focusing on the second challenge and to be able to have all the resources you need to go ahead and conduct your research or build your solution for this particular challenge. We would like to tell you a little bit more about how we developed the models or the frameworks that we use throughout the different stages of project aims and the papers that we published or we have now under review. And then run you through the challenge and what we would like you to do and how are we going to try to evaluate your solutions. Again, I hope you were able to join us for the previous workshop. This is where we went quite in depth and explained some of the data sources that we used in this project. And of course, you will need those data sources to develop these solutions. And as well, if you are able to join or to listen to the recordings from yesterday, you have learned a lot about the need of AI solutions to assess the statements, but also about the international template developed by the three governments to assess the modern slavery statements, which is going to be a key element in developing your solution. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, don't worry, there are recordings on the agenda. We're going to link the agenda again on the screen so you have access to the to the recordings, but you can access it through to the website of the hackathon. So today what we're going to do is to show you some of the papers that we developed, and then some of the co-authors are going to dive into specific elements of these papers, and then we're going to explain to you exactly how we develop those elements. So we're going to start with our first paper. It is one that you have already heard about, and you are able to find that on our GitHub. So that's our aims.au data set and benchmark paper. I am going to share my screen, but if you please let me know if you're able to see the preprint of the paper.
Yes.
Yep. So once again, you find this paper through our GitHub, and this is the link here and a lot more information, but this is how the paper looks like. So again, in this first paper, what we decided to do was to build this annotated data set that was taking on the mandatory criteria of the Australian legislation, translate them into questions, and then use that to build an annotated annotation specifications, train the annotators, go within each document and assess at sentence level if we find if a sentence belongs or not to any of the mandatory criteria. And then we build this wonderful the largest annotated data set of modern slavery statements from Australia, and we have a subset of gold data set and for testing and validation that were annotated by experts that we use to test the quality of our results. We also have some statistics, so on this paper on how generally the statements look like. We would really encourage you, if you are also able, when you are using modern slavery statements, to keep up and update those type of statistics. We're interested if the statements page counts or sentence lengths or word count are shifting from one year to another. And then here we're looking into the particular components of our annotated data set. So what you're seeing with these graphs is how, in a way, imbalanced the data set is. We have simpler annotations. So questions such as, is the document approved or signed by the board, generally require only a sentence or a couple of sentences as evidence to check for that information. But when we ask more complex questions like description of any kind, so criteria 2, 3, 4, 5, that are asking for description of supply chain, description of risk, description of mitigation, remediation, and so on, we tend to have a few more sentences as evidence per criteria. And that's particularly relevant for criteria 4 for risk mitigation, where the annotations are, or the law is asking for the company to describe any action that the company took to mitigate for modern slavery. So there's quite a lot of different ways in which companies are responding to that. So there are a lot of sentences generally that are relevant for this criteria. But also on the opposite, the remediation of cases of modern slavery, generally it's quite poorly reported in statements. So we tend to expect that a company will discuss remediation of modern slavery only if they also have described cases of modern slavery. But because we don't have a lot of description of that, also the remediation discourse within statements is quite low. So this is the background of why we have our data quite unbalanced, in the sense that some criteria require more sentences for evidence, some others less. So we have this type of statistics, and we encourage you to also try to bring them out for your own data. And then what we have here are some results of our models. And in this paper, we have two different type of models that we have compared. So we have the models that we fine-tuned based on this annotated data set for the different mandatory criteria, and the models that we just use prompts that we developed and that are available for your use here on the GitHub. So these are the prompts, and you can see the document. You can download it, and you can access these prompts. And we compare the results of the fine-tune with zero-shot models, and then we do this in two settings. One with no context, where we just provide a sentence for classification, and then with context, where we provide a sentence plus 100 words context around the sentence. So maybe now I'll invite Pierre-Luc, who has been doing the work on fine-tuning the models at the beginning for this paper, to tell us a little bit more how he did that.
Sure. All right. So to give you a little bit of background, these experiments that Adriana just shared at a high level for the API-based models. So the OpenAI models like GPT 3.5, GPT-4, and Llama 3.2. In the API approach, we just use one of these providers. We just use a bunch of credits, and that was good enough. The thing is, if you don't have access to credits, if you don't want to pay out of pocket, you will have to use local models. There's a number of solutions that exist. Local hosting, especially the compressed, quantized, prune models, it might be interesting. But all of these approaches, you just need a prompt. You just need, as Adriana described, a way to structure your query to extract the information you're looking for. So on that front, all you need is a good library. Something like LangChain is a good approach. That's probably what I would use today if we were to conduct these experiments anew. On the other side of the spectrum, if you want to work with models that you would fine-tune, what we did in the past was fine-tuning using PyTorch. So we pulled language models directly from Hugging Face, and we fine-tuned them using PyTorch, just a regular kind of classic approach. We set up an optimizer, we set up a training loop, we just show examples. Today, this would still work, but it might not be the most straightforward or simple approach to use anymore, because, for example, if you use a modern language model, these will typically come with conversation or chat templates. it's essentially like a template that structures the way you would interact with the model if you want to provide it messages. It's best to follow the templates that were used when they built the models, so that if you do any kind of fine tuning, you're still in distribution. You're still using the models as they were meant to be used. So for that, I would strongly suggest that if you want to work with language models and fine tune them, look up Hugging Face, look up the tooling around Hugging Face and the chat templates that are provided through Hugging Face tokenizers. That is definitely a good approach. All the most recent open source models that are all available in Hugging Face. There's a very large spectrum also of model sizes that go from very tiny models that will work just on CPU and that's enough, all the way to extremely big models that you'll need a cluster to run. So that's a good thing to note. Other things to note, I can share maybe my screen again, back to the notebook I was sharing earlier, because I just want to show you one small bit of information which I find interesting. So if you have good eyes, you might be able to see it. It's these two lines at the very bottom. So in short, for the data set that we provide across all of the annotated statements, you will find a total of 808,000 annotated senses. Interestingly, and related to the plot that Adriana just showed, most of the senses are not relevant for any criterion. And specifically, as Adriana just noted, the criterion that has the most relevant text in any statement is like C4, mitigation. So about 20% of all the sentences in any statement will roughly be talking about mitigation. And the rest, it's very, very few sentences. So I really want to highlight this. If you want to go and build a classifier, you will have 800,000 examples if you work with sentences directly. But out of these 800,000, there's only 260,000 that are positive labels. And out of these, the huge majority of them, they're just for mitigation. So this is an extremely imbalanced classification problem. You need to be aware of this. You need to mitigate for this problem. So yes, that's probably the key points I'd like to share at this point.
And maybe to put this in other words, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but an interpretation of that could be just to showcase that while companies are publishing these long, long reports, actually just a fraction of the information from those reports are relevant to the mandatory criteria. And when those are relevant, they're mainly relevant for this super big question of mitigation, and not a lot for other very important criteria that, as we've learned yesterday, people want to learn about, particularly risk description and also remediation. So that's why it's important to be able to really go through all this business fluff and find the good sentences that are actually telling us that the company has said something relevant and they really did do something for modern slavery. So thank you so much, Pierre-Luc. And maybe now I can share the next paper that we've done. So just to put this in the context, once we were able to publish the paper with the dataset and benchmark, we started exploring this question on, now that we fine-tune models on the Australian modern slavery statements, can these models assess Canadian and UK modern slavery statements? And as we were seeing earlier this morning, but also yesterday, the three legislations are very common in what they require. So this is the Australian Modern Slavery Act and what is described and the criteria, and then you see how they are having very good equivalence in both the UK and Canada. So we were able to map the reporting requirements among these three legislations, and then to annotate some data from UK and Canada to be able to test our results. And we had also here we have some statistics with the count of sentences and words per different statements, but also per different criteria. And you see that this trend of relevant sentences being mainly around the mitigations still sits true also for Canada and the UK. So we see the same level of imbalanced data across all the three legislations. But maybe I would like to invite Jordan and Akshatha to discuss a little bit more about the results of these papers, because in this paper we're not only checking for how well the models perform, but also we're creating this explainability methods, and also Duoyi has worked on this as well. So I'm going to pass now to the other co-authors. Would you like me to keep sharing my screen, or would you like me to let you share your screen?
I think maybe I'll go first if that's all right with the other two, and
Yeah,
I can just take over the screen. I'll be sharing the same
perfect.
document, but maybe I'll scroll around
Yeah,
a
it'll
little
be
bit differently.
easier. Perfect.
Okay. So I'll start. Is this visible?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so I'll start by just maybe springboarding off the results that Pierre-Luc talked about earlier. So these are the zero-shot results. So I'm currently showing the aims.au paper. The zero-shot results with just API provided models, as well as the fine-tuned results using fine-tuned models such as BERT and Llama 3.2. And we have basically direct analogs to those experiments in our subsequent paper. The main thing we were interested in here is, as Adriana mentioned, we have much fewer annotated statements for Canada and the UK. So one of the things that we were interested in learning is, given that we have all this annotated data from Australia, can we just fine-tune models on the Australian data and directly apply them to Canada and UK statements? And as she mentioned, a lot of the criteria are directly mappable. There are, oh, there we go. There are a couple that are not directly mappable. So some of these results are not directly comparable, especially when we're talking about overall F1 score, which is actually the metrics that we're reporting in this table right here. But overall, what we've actually seen in these results is that there's a slight performance degradation when we apply models fine-tuned on Australian data to Canada and the UK, but overall, it's quite similar. We have results broken down by the sub-questions as well, each of the criteria, and you can see there's quite large differences between them. And a lot of that is a reflection of the data imbalance and data availability that was mentioned earlier. And one other set of experiments that we were curious in running as well was, I'll just scroll down to this table here, was calibration experiments, basically checking to what extent the confidence of the model or the probability that it output was correlated with actually the fraction of the time that it was actually correct in its guess. And some of these are quite heavily imbalanced. This is a binning-based calibration curve. So, for example, for approval and signature, the model tends to either be 100% or 0%. There's not very much in the middle. But for some of the other categories that are a little more ambiguous, we see actually quite good calibration results. We didn't do any particular adjustments here. There are approaches that can be applied to improve calibration results to make it so that the predicted probabilities that are output from the model more closely align with the fraction of the time that the model is correct. Yeah, I think maybe if I were to mention one other thing from our experience, we explored a couple different models. The two main different types are Llama and BERT, which there are newer versions of this. Well, I think Duoyi is going to talk about modern BERT at some point, which is a model that came out just shortly after this. BERT is an encoder only transformer, and Llama is a decoder only transformer. And there's even though we saw the performance slightly better for Llama, it's quite a bit more computationally expensive to run. So that's a consideration to keep in mind as well in your experiments if you decide to play with either of these models. Yeah, maybe I'll pass it to Akshatha now to talk about some of these other results. That's all right.
Thank you. Let me share my screen as well. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
We see your desktop.
Not the browser?
No, we see a lot of screenshots.
Oh, wow. Okay. Share my screen again.
Still seeing desktop.
Okay. Can you see now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So another thing that we tried with this paper is to improve explainability of the model prediction. So while all the models that we tried were giving binary predictions, it's not easy to understand why these models are giving these predictions. So we need to know this for two reasons. First is we want to know that the models are giving a positive prediction for a specific criteria is for the right reasons. And the second reason is that we want the stakeholders to trust the model's prediction so that they also are aware of the rationales that the models are taking to give a specific prediction. So to improve this explainability aspect, we adopted a SHAP explainability tool. So it's a game theory based method, which tries to generate model prediction by including or excluding tokens to find the token's value in giving a specific prediction. So in figure 6 here, you have an example. So for here in this example, the prediction is the underlying C2 structure, and tokens that are highlighted in red are the SHAP predictions that they said that these tokens were important to give a specific prediction. There are a few problems with this approach. First is it's computationally expensive. So the model SHAP is trying to do multiple predictions with different tokens. So it takes a long time to generate if the model is big. And the second reason is it's not always easy to interpret these results. So you can see sometimes it highlights things which are not always correlated with the correct answer. So for these two reasons, this is not a great tool, but it's the first step towards increasing the visibility of the predicted decisions. Another thing that we also did here is to get chain of thought reasoning answer rationales for a given prediction. So another idea that we tried was to improve these rationales in spoken language so that it's easy for somebody who does not come with the AI background to be able to see the results. And anyway, it's a human in the loop system. So there is always going to be a human who's going to look at the decision and the rationale and make a prediction. So the idea was to make it easy for a human to be able to make the final call or to trust the model prediction through these outputs. So this is a follow-up paper which is not out in public yet, but in this work, what we did try to do is to make the model prediction more aligned to the compliance criteria. For example, you see key rules on the left and you have a given target sentence. We fine-tuned the model so that the model rationales are aligned with the rules. So the rationale would mention which rule the given sentence is adherent or not adherent to, and then gives a final prediction. And for that, the main component here is LLM as a judge. So we used an LLM as a judge to compare the given key rules and a given sentence and to say whether a generated completion or an answer contains all the key rules or not. This is just to make sure that the model, when giving a prediction, is considering all the key rules. And only if it is considering all the key rules, the judge will give a high score. So this is one of the methods that we tried. There are also a lot of problems in this issue, right? So we do have the final reasoning here, but how do we check that the reasoning that the model is giving is correct? A human has to go through this, but it's a lot of text, so it increases the workload for a human to validate. So there are a lot of shortcomings in this, but this is also another approach to improve explainability. Recently, there are a few other approaches. There can be like tree-based explainability, or if it is a chat-based system, there could be a counterfactual question. If a model says, yes, this is compliant to a specific criteria, you can ask a follow-up question. Why do you think it is so? So these are the different ideas that could be implemented to improve explainability. Uh, but again, like I want to highlight that explainability is important in these kind of compliance scenarios, because we want to gain the trust of practitioners, and also we want to ensure that the decisions are correct as to the right reasons as much as possible, because the consequences can be quite serious. That's all from me. Do you want to go next?
Thanks, Akshatha. Let me share my screen. So back to the Ames check paper, we built a pipeline including the prediction for the testing sentence and also the explanation part Akshatha just mentioned. And we also developed these tools for evidence tracking, which enable the more explanation to the user. For example, we apply these kind of functions. So we built some small tools to check if one sentence has been compliant on certain criteria detected by the trained model. Is it implemented already, or it is planned to do in the future? So users can use this kind of functionalities to test, to gain more knowledge about the data. So it's all aimed to improve the usability. And to build the tool, so here for the implemented and the planned, we simply use some linguistic tool to judge the tense of a sentence. For example, if the sentence describes something has been done previously, then we will highly mark it as implemented. If they mention something about the future, then it will be marked as planned. But feel free to use other technique to improve this part. As for the negative evidence, so for this part, we use BART, B-A-R-T model for the zero-shot learning to detect if the sentence contains negative evidence or not. And another thing I'd like to mention within this Ames check paper is that once we pre-train the model, we now have something can tell us if a PDF is compliant to C1, for example, C2, for example, or the approval or others. And we can use it to do other kinds of visualization thing. So here we utilize the meta information of the turnover of a company, and also organization sector, and also these like the statement year to evaluate the trend over the time for these compliance analysis. And also here is a summarization about the compliance proportion by sector, and also the analysis by turnover, which could be useful for the end user. And I think that's all I want to mention for this Ames check.
Thank you. And just to wrap up with this paper, as Akshatha mentioned, we also did the chain of thoughts for the prompt part. So when you go to the GitHub and you're gonna find the prompts in that document, you'll see there are all the simple prompts and prompts with chain of thoughts. And also you'll see that we also in our benchmark added DeepSeek. That's when the DeepSeek model entered into the stage and it was making a lot of waves around, so we had to put it in to be able to be competitive. And actually we saw that for our case study, the DeepSeek model, which has the chain of thoughts embedded inside, was actually not working as good as maybe the hype was predicting, but also it was very, very slow. I think Akshatha, it took days for us to get the results of that particular part of the research. So just to highlight some of those insights, we think it'll be better for you to try to use our prompts if you're just checking for the compliance. If you are, and you will have to go and ask for more granular questions, as we're going to go and explain in a minute, as we're asking you to move beyond what we've done by integrating the reporting template from the government, then you can use our prompts as inspiration and make sure you add relevant questions or improvements from to be able to cover this more granular question. And we would like to see your prompts because we need to check that your prompts are good as well. So that's about this second paper, AIMS check. But we didn't stop there. So Duoyi will tell you a little bit more than what we did in our AIMS distill paper. So we try to keep all of our papers named the same. So it's clear that it's part of the same, they're part of the same project. And as the title says, we looked into distillation. So Duoyi, do you need me to share screen, or are you okay on your
I can
end?
share the screen.
Super, thanks.
Okay. I think the purpose of presenting this work is to show you, like, give you some ideas for fine-tuning the model if you would like to do that. And aside from that, I will get you to the location of a trained model, which is a modern bird that Jordan previously mentioned. And you can directly use it without fine-tuning anything. So the idea of building this AIMS DCU model is that we noticed that although we fine-tune lots of model, some of it may take lots of memory to run it at the user side. So we would like to build a smaller model which distill the knowledge from the previous, the large, good performed model, and then use it on a not that memory heavy environment. So the idea is that we train different kind of teachers. So here we use different techniques according to the data problem of this AIMS.AO dataset. So the first thing we train is a contrastive learning model to distinguish between some, we call it confused labels. For example, sometimes the machine has some issue to distinguish between the C4 risk description and C3 risk description and the C4. So we train several contrastive learning target at addressing this kind of issue. So that's the first feature. And aside from that, Adriana designed some domain-specific prompts, and we train another llama model with the guidance of this prompt for supervised learning and got some not bad performance. Aside from that, we have this teacher 3, which utilize the pseudo-labeled data available from those repositories that Jordan has showed you previously in the previous session. So the purpose of including these unlabeled documents is to enrich the representation space. So in the AIMS.AU dataset, we collected something from the Australian modern slavery, the reports, and we also collect the unlabeled data from the UK and the Canadian repository to enrich the representation. And the last one is the one we used from the AIMS.check. So there is a Llama 100 model trained by the Jordan and Akshatha. So the idea of this work is that while we predict one sentence, we also include the context around it to enrich the representation. So after training these 4 good models, we applied the knowledge distillation between this expert and also a modern bird model. So the reason we use modern bird, the first reason is suggested by Akshatha and Jordan, because this is one of the state-of-the-art model which allows more input and is trained with relatively new data. And the second reason is because it is also a kind of bird model, which is bidirectional encoder model. And we use it because it's also lightweighted. And we use knowledge distillation between these 4 teachers and also the student. So the student will understand the logic to predict for one sentence, and it also use some supervised loss to get the optimization process. So that's the idea of this knowledge distillation. While using, you only need to access the student model and use it for prediction and do other kinds of tasks, as we mentioned previously. So for the location of this distillation model, it is available under this GitHub repository under the folder of this AIMS distill. So if you click it, and there are some code available for the, I think I read it in PyTorch. So you will access a data set and how to use it for evaluation. So it's just a standard way to do that. And also here I attach a test CSV file, which is exactly same as the aims.test file we used in the previous papers. So if you download this file, you can directly run this evaluation function and get some idea how to use it for evaluation. So as for the weight, I put it on Google Drive. So this file is about 1 gigabyte. And if you download it and you can like run it on your own machine. So I'm still running it with my laptop using GPU, but I think you can also run it with CPU. Yeah, so that's basically the idea of this work.
Do you want to show a bit the statistics on how much faster and more efficient this model
Okay,
is?
yeah, good
So
point.
just to justify why we thought that it's needed to do this, because we're building resources for resource-constrained environments like NGOs and governments.
Yeah, thank you. So here we tested the performance between an ensemble model, which combined all the teacher models I introduced previously, and also the distilled model, which is based on modern BERT. So we tested two perspectives. The first one is like the processing time for 50, 100, 150, and also 200 statements. And we also tested the energy usage, like the gap between those two. So that's basically the idea of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Duoyi. So we have this, as I said, this modern BERT model made available for you, but you'll also see on the GitHub that we also made the weights of the llama model from the previous paper available. So hopefully you'll be able to access them all. So again, if you go back to the GitHub, this is where you find all the information, the data, the prompts now with all the prompts, including chain of thought, all the code of this, and then the weights of the llama and the weights of modern BERT. And in a final paper we presented briefly yesterday and this morning, Hannah and I and Carrie, we started to look into these larger questions on how do we move beyond just checking for these large questions of compliance, but try to ask more granular questions within those statements. So what we've done, we did a literature review of all the studies that have assessed UK or Australian modern slavery statement. We find about 23 of them that have their methodology open source, but some of them happen in multiple years. So we find 13 unique benchmarking methodologies, just like we discussed in detail yesterday. So please go to the panel of assessing modern slavery statements from yesterday, and you're going to learn everything about these benchmarking methodologies. So what we've done in this paper, we went through all the different studies. We put together all the different questions that each of these studies is asking, but of course, some of the studies are asking the same question. So is the document approved? So this will be a question that repeats multiple times. So we end up with 211 unique questions across all these different methodologies. We give them a high-level topic, and then we map them back to the 7 mandatory criteria of the law, so we can use this relationship in assessing the document further. How does this look? So it looks like this. Here are, so this is a data and policy paper. So there is a lot of text because we're talking with policymakers and they like to provide full background. So these are the studies. You are now familiar with the walk-free beyond compliance, with the work from PAM and also the CCLA. We discuss this in depth in the workshop, so please feel free to go back there. But those are the ones that we found to have their methodology open source. And once we started mapping the questions, so we see here the 7 mandatory criteria. Now we see the level of detail of subtopics, and within each of these subtopics you can go and have a lot more granular questions that you want to ask. And once you know a question that you want to ask, this is the framework that Duoyi helped us build that allows us to move within a statement. So let's say we take a statement and we want to ask a questions regarding risk. So instead of just asking, has the company described risk, which will be criteria 3 of the law, we want within this criteria to ask about, let's say, migrant workers as a risk. So we know that this question is linked to criteria 3. So we ask our tiny model, very efficient model, Modern Bird, to go within the document and extract all the relevant sentences for criteria 3, the risk description, and the sentences around that, and then provide that as evidence to Gemma with a prompt asking the initial question if migrant workers are described as a risk. If this model says yes, then they will output to the human reviewer an answer and the reasoning of that answer. If there is not enough evidence from our Modern Bird, or this model says, actually, I don't know, or I don't understand, then we have a fallout model, a watchdog model using a RAG pipeline that Duoyi can tell you a little bit more about it, that extracts the evidence based on the similarity of the question and then provides that evidence to the model and then outputs an answer and a reasoning. So if this model say, actually, yes, I did find the sentence in the statement that your Modern Bird didn't get, and this is my reasoning why I think the company actually described migrant workers as a risk. Or it can say also, I don't know, so therefore most likely the company hasn't described it. Both models haven't met this. And we had a really good question earlier today when we presented this paper high level, which they say, well, one of the participants asked, well, if the agent 2 provides an answer instead of agent 1, would the human reviewer always trust agent 2? And the answer is no, because when we assess this work, we assess it manually. So we look at, as a human reviewer, you want to see the answer and the reasoning. And many times these models get to the right answer, but the reasoning is completely hallucinated. So we still need the human to decide, and it will not be an automatic decisions that if agents to provide an answer, then it's automatically the right answer. So those are some of the important considerations here. Duoyi, would you like to present anything a bit more in detail about this framework from the paper, or some code or anything, or not necessarily?
Oh, I think the only thing I want to mention is for that GMA model you showed previously, we use the Olama to access it and run it on our local machine. And for the GMA model, it requires lots of memory to run it if you are going to design something similar. So we recommend you to use some API tools or a lightweight model like Llama 8B and others. So for the for the language model side, like you may use Gemini. So I know Gemini provides some open some tokens available, free to use, something like that. So feel free to also use those kind of tools.
And also in our papers, in all of our papers, if you go into the appendix, you'll find a lot of error analysis. So you'll see the limitations of our work, and we always try to be very transparent with where we are and what we're doing and what works and what it doesn't. And especially in these last papers where we have run manual assessment or quality checks of the answers, we were able to find a lot of those. So for instance, I'm not sure if you remember, probably remember a lot better than me, Duoyi, but so we run the experiments, and also Hannah is here. So Hannah is also one of the co-authors here, and she has done, she's a domain expert, so she's done a lot of this verification. But when we did the first running of experiments and we got the results, there were a lot of failures, and then we realized that actually Olama had a limitation on the number of tokens that it was able to take. So once this token number was higher, everything else afterwards in the experiment was failing, and the model started hallucinating because it still wanted to give us an answer, but it was really just such a bad performance. And then we had to break this context, because in this paper, remember what Pierre-Luc was showing in terms of the number of sentences that are relevant for each of the criteria. So when you ask a question about criteria for mitigation and you extract all the relevant sentences for that, plus 100 word context around each sentence, the context, this evidence that you provide to Gemma is really high. You provide maybe 50% of the document at this point. And this is when this memory or these limitations on tokens were entering into effect and were creating a lot of issues to be able to run these experiments. So do a few runs of testing, small, just 1-2 documents, observe any issues, and then try to correct them as you go instead of trying to run really big. I see a hand up from Jonathan.
Yes, hello, good night. It's
Hello.
so interesting, this type of research. I have a chance to work in supply chain. My question is about this no deterministic model for look at deterministic fields, because now, yes, it's possible the reports are okay or are clear, but in future the reports will will ge- will generate with AI. So in this case, how can to create the advertisement for avoid this type of the this type of violation of the system or something like that? Because nowadays we have yes, deterministic of put information, but in the future the to give the information maybe to generate information is not the real information. So how can to add this type of filters or something like that? This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is a really lovely question. And if I'll try to rephrase it to make sure I understood, and please let me know if I understand your question correctly. So your question is, now the reports are written by humans in these businesses, but in the future we'll have more and more parts of the report, if not the full report, written by AI, like people with. So how can we identify this and how can we correct for that, correct?
Yeah.
So this is a really great question, and I would really encourage all of you again to go on the sessions from yesterday and remember, especially in the first session from the government, all of them put a slide at the end with what they would like AI to help them in the future. And I think it was the representative of the UK government who said, "Can you help us identify if the reports are written by AI?" So they already are thinking about this, just the way you do as well. So if you're picking on this challenge, why not taking on this as a subset of your challenge and try to provide already a solution for it? And there are already quite a few solutions out there that are trying to identify if texts are being generated by AI. I know Akshatha can talk a lot about this. She does a lot of work on image generation with AI, so she can tell you a little bit more about that. But try to think if you would like to add this as a feature of your work, because you already heard from the government that they care about that. That being said, just because a statement is written by AI, it doesn't mean it's a bad statement. If that AI is good, and again, these statements all have to be written, signed by the board. So whatever the statement will be, the board give their responsibility, and the board of directors, they have legal obligations and legal responsibilities. So it's on them. If they will sign on a document that is really bad, that's going to be a big responsibility for them then to explain, or a big task for them to explain. I don't think having AI writing a statement is a necessarily bad thing as long as it's done well. But having tools to identify when that's the case and providing that information to the government to decide if they want to investigate further would be a very useful tool. So thank you for that question. And Akshatha, do you want to talk a little bit more about those tools that are helping us identify outputs of AI?
Yeah, of course. I agree with you, Adriana, that using an AI tool is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a bad thing if the AI is hallucinating facts about the company which are not true and that has been in the report and it has been signed. That it becomes a problem. So we're coming to the tools that are there to identify this AI written content. There are watermarking tools. The company themselves sometimes add these watermarks that can be traced by them. So it's not a very difficult challenge for the generators of the content to identify if it was generated by them specifically. But there is a lack of universal detectors of AI. So if there can be a model that is trained to detect specific types of AI written text, but if a new model comes next year, it may or may not fit this detector. So that is still an open challenge. But a colleague of mine recently shared a work that showed that if a human has seen enough AI generated text, he can identify with a high level of accuracy that it is written by an AI. So I don't think it's very far away. It is possible to do. That said, I don't think that itself is going to solve the problem. The problem is more about how the tool was used and if it is used to generate a content that is incorrect. So I think that's more important.
And maybe oh, Hannah, perfect, you go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so I work with businesses and we develop platforms and solutions for businesses. One of the ones we have, it's just an example of AI being used in report creation. We have a tool that helps a business to collect all of their information, maybe get reports that they've written before, to pass it to understand what information was already included in their own reports, and put it in a way so that you can fulfill another reporting requirement. So I know many other platforms out there already that are helping to simplify that reporting process. So just as an example, as what the other two people were saying, writing a report with AI is not a problem as long as it's based on facts. So just watch out when you're making a system to identify that you're not identifying a helper. Like if anyone here writes essays, for example, afterwards you put it through Grammarly just to make sure it sounds nicer and all of that. And it's the same thing that a business will do.
Yeah, and I will say that I think the biggest challenge here, and it's regardless if the report is written by humans or by an AI, is how do we move beyond just checking what companies are saying in the report with other data sources that allow us to figure out if what they're saying is true. And that's why I was mentioning before in the previous workshop, on the data workshop, that we would love for the participants in that challenge to be able to create a more comprehensive profile of a company. So when we're assessing a company's Modern Slavery Act, we also now know that this company has a couple of other reports. The company appeared in a few media sources or in a few news. And then we have this claim of a company. A company says, we have been training our employees 5 years in a row. And then we have a news article where this an employee of a company, let's say, says, we have never been trained by the company. And these two data points now showcase that there might be a misalignment between what companies are saying versus what they're doing. And that's the reason why we ask you to do that exercise in the first pillar of the data challenge, of trying to collect as many data sources about companies as possible, so we can try to prepare the layer ground on moving in the future from only looking within the statements like we're doing now and comparing that information with other data sources. And I think that will be relevant regardless if the document is written by human or by the AI. Is that clear, Jonathan?
Yes, thank you, Adriana. It's all clear.
Super.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so is everybody ready to see the challenge and what we will ask you to do for the AI model? I hope so. All right, I'm going to share my screen and then we can go together through that, and we can see if you have any questions. But again, remember, we will share all this information with you. So in the AI challenge, we will ask you to move beyond assessing a modern slavery statement simply for the information from the mandatory criteria like we've done so far, but being able now to use this international reporting template that was developed by the 3 governments. And again, we had 2 sessions on this yesterday, so please watch those to familiarize yourself very clearly with this resource. So in this template now, as you see, instead of the government just asking the company to describe their operation and supply chain and structure, they are asking to go and describe a lot more granular information on each of them. Organization size, the countries where they operate, the trading entities, the supply chain where they operate, etc. And every single mandatory criteria now is broken in 2 layers or levels. Level 1 is this information needs to be there for compliance. And then level 2 is where the government thinks that the company should go with their reporting to showcase best practices. So talking about long-term partnerships, the contracts, the details of direct operations versus outsourcing functions. So you see that now every single mandatory criteria, they are mapping it across the 3 legislations, similar in the way we did in AIM's check paper when we tried to map the 3 legislations. So, but also providing a lot more granular information within each of the criteria and the levels of reporting. Level 1 is basic compliance. Level 2 it is good practice. So you can take each of these individual points, you can transform them in questions, and maybe if you want, you can use a similar way or method in a way the way we've done it here in our AIMS check paper. So instead of using the questions that we designed here, you can add your own question, and you can still use our fine-tuned modern BERT, because this is still linked to the mandatory criteria, because the reporting, you see, the reporting template still maps it all back to the mandatory criteria. But you can add more agents, you can add better explainability. I mean, we would love you to add more explainability methods and better methods to be able to now take a statement and check if this template and all its different granular information are met. So this is the first pillar of this challenge, and you will have a lot of resources, and we added here the resources from the chat. So in the first pillar of this, we ask you to move beyond compliance and to improve explainability. So you should detect the elements of the template, so the template that I just showed, within each statement, and then link the model prediction with the specific text snippets. So you have to explain to us again where in the text the prediction comes from, and make sure that your models explain their reasoning. And then provide interpretable outputs for the human in the loop, right? For the human reviewer here to be able to understand why your models decided that this element of the template it is found or not. The second part of this challenge is more related to what Duoyi was showing from this paper in the appendix. We don't want to stay anymore at just one statement assessment level. We want to see trends and statistics across different industries or different reporting years or different countries. So you have access to a lot of statements, you have access to many years of reporting and many industries and all the metadata that you'll find in the registries. So can you bring us some really interesting statistics? And now you have all these different criteria or questions that you are assessing. So these are some examples of the questions that we want to see. You saw some example of compliance per industry, turnover, or country, like the way Duoyi showed you. But how many companies are at level 1 reporting versus level 2? And can you see these reporting levels, how they change from 2022 to 2025, for instance, in the UK or in Australia? Which industries are more advanced in reporting? Which templates elements are the most reported on already? So this will allow us to really understand where our company are in their journey to reporting according to this template and identify gaps. So when you take a statement, you'll be able to assess how many of those criteria are met or not and populate a template, right? And then highlight for each company what are the elements missing. So once you have a company statement assessed across the template, you can say these are the elements that of the template that a company responded, and these are the elements that they didn't. So with the element that the company didn't cover, why not write those as a recommendation for companies in the future? So you say next year you will need to answer this, this, and this if you want to move from level 1 to level 2, for instance. So those are the two pillars: move beyond compliance to the template and help us generate insights, high-level summarization, and recommendation for companies at statement level. Do you want to go forward and have something that stands out? Why not to try to help us improve these future action predictions? This is one thing that we heard many, many times throughout the panels that the civic society wants to see is how are companies keeping their promises from one year to another? Is the company saying for 5 years in a row that they're providing training, or are they actually acting in year 2 on their promises from year 1? Can you assess this? Why not add here, check if the statement is generated by AI, which we've learned today. So be creative, add extra things so you can really stand out from your peers. The deliverables here will be the model pipeline. So you can use our models, but we're really going to focus on how you're improving this pipeline. We're not going to benchmark you if you can beat our results on modern BERT or something like this. That's not really the aim. I mean, if you are able to do that, you can, but you're already having access to the testing and validation data, so we won't be able to check if you have used that in training just to beat the results. So if you want to do it and you want to do it correctly, we'd be really interested to look at that. But what we really care now is how do we move from just checking for compliance to more granular assessment, right? And then what we're going to assess, you're going to send us your data back. We're going to take a random sample of those documents and we are going to assess them manually. So we will be putting our hat as a user, as a human reviewer here. And we say, we have all these questions. I'm interested in the contracts from this company. How well was your model and the entire pipeline, the way you want to design it, how well was it able to identify that question? And as a human, I want to have enough information. I need explainability, like Akshatha showed you, to be able to trust that your results are good. We ask you to document very clear everything you've done. Again, this is so in the future, if you are the winning solution, a lot of people who want to use your tools and would like to collaborate with you, so they need to be able to understand what you've done. And then again, we need those statistics, the way you are able to answer this part of insights and visualize and really help think about the potential user in the future. How are they going to make use of all these different insights that you're generating? So the evaluation criteria, we're looking at how well you're able to align your pipeline with the template, explainability, the way, how reliable your results are based on how the user is going to interpret it, and insightfulness of these statistics, right? How you're thinking about making the most of the metadata that you're going to have access to through the registries and everything, and be able to provide useful insights for users. And practicality, again, think about making really lightweight solutions that people can use where they don't have resources, that people can use in resource efficient methods for the others. Some tips: always link your prediction to the text, create explainability, like we said, show us why the model predicts what it did, highlight snippets, rationales, all the thinking. Focus on small and high quality samples, and be efficient. I think test a lot and fail and check why your models are failing. Like we were giving you the example with Olama, we luckily caught that really early on, so we didn't have to spend a lot more time assessing more documents. The benchmark against AIMS baseline, I think I will rephrase this because I don't want you to be confused in terms of literal benchmarks, but rather we want you to improve from compliance check to something more advanced. And then again, check for longitudinal tracking of promises or AI generation or any other ideas that you heard in some of the panels. So remember, this is something that should be usable, trustworthy, explainable, show us how you move beyond what has been already created. Don't just replicate this paper because that's already done. We want to see more. And this is not like a polished production system. That's another challenge. We just want you to build good solutions, but don't think that this needs to be something that tomorrow needs to be deployed or called in an API. So I'll stop here just to check if there are any questions. And here are the resources from the chat that we developed today. But let's see, are there any question? Yes. Not sure. Yashdip, do you have a question or maybe it was just a response to something? All right. What do you think? Is it clear? Is it straightforward? So as you see, this challenge is not, I think we did this with all the other challenges as well. We want to give you enough so you know what you're doing, but we are very interested in your innovation. So you want to feel that you have the space to innovate and create and show us things we haven't even thought about. And because we don't have annotated data for the template, so we can't test you in a more traditional academic sense of benchmarking, right? With on the quality of your outputs, but rather we will put, as I mentioned, the perspective of a user, and we're going to try to random sample many of your outputs and try to see how well your system works. But also you can show this to us in your pitch as well. So try to look at that. And if you want to stand out, apologies for keep repeating myself, but please go back to the panels from yesterday. Those will be the users, the governments, the civic society, and they have very clearly outlined for you things that they will need to see in the future or they would use. So why not directly answer to some of that as well, if you have enough skills in your team and time. Not sure what else to say. Are there any pieces of advice again from the panelists? You have now here a group of senior machine learning experts. You can ask them anything you want, and they are here to support you. So don't be shy, but if not, just I'm just gonna ask them what do they think that would be good for participants to keep in mind as they are embarking into this journey. Oh, we have a question. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Just want to understand that is it up to us to present the evaluation metrics or the performance metrics that our model is able to produce? Or
Yeah,
do you
so
have
you
some specific ones? Yeah, do you want to suggest some specific ones that you would like to see?
so so you can show us if you are able to create some metrics. So we normally use the F1 because we have such an imbalanced data. But again, we are providing to you not only the training data, but also the testing and validation only for the compliance level, right? The high level compliance. So if you want to use that and bring evidence from there, fine. If you have time to annotate some data, but we don't know if we can like trust that data because we need experts to annotate it. So I'm not sure exactly how you are going to go around trying to build your metrics, but if you find a way, just present that to us. What we would expect is for you to send us back a couple of documents, maybe 100, 200, try to have representative sample. From that sample, we will random sample a couple of them, and we want to see how well your models or your system is able to populate a template and provide the evidence to the user that is going to assess these documents with all the information we need that we can trust your model. The confidence level of your model in prediction, the explainability part, the snippets of text used in prediction. You can give us as much information as you think is relevant, but also in a format that is easy to digest and helps the user to prioritize. Like now was saying yesterday in the session, she would probably trust the model of a confidence over 80, but she would not trust the answers below that. So she can prioritize based on the confidence level, but then for the rest, she needs to have some information. So that's the way we are going to assess these outputs, particularly for that section of the model prediction and explainability. For the statistics, I think it's a bit more straightforward. Is that clear, or we can discuss this a bit more in detail, or we can brainstorm some more ideas if you like.
Also, yeah, sorry, thanks for answering that. Also, how you said you don't want us to have a production grade code, um, but do you want us to maybe make sure it has you're able to run this through a UI, or is just having Python scripts also okay?
I think the better you make it, the best. I would, if you do have the skills to make it runnable in a UI UX, that will be fantastic, because that's the ultimate goal that we want to do, and you'll learn more about this in the next workshop. Realistically, I think Python scripts will be sufficient as long as you are presenting to us the outputs. You're not just sending us just some Python scripts and be like, now run it and figure out your outputs. That would not work. We need you to also present the outputs to us and everything, but we also need to understand your code. But again, the more advanced in that development, the better. It's just that I don't want people to have the expectation that we expect an application from you at the end of this that runs smoothly or something like this. That's a different challenge. Thanks. Okay. Any other question?
Yes, Adriana, I have a question
Perfect.
the same way, in the same way about the code and low code options like AN is a platform we can use to do um, this type of applications. It is possible to do in this type of application, or they only need to use a line chain, something like that, for present the project. I don't know if I have a requirement for this.
So I'll give you my very brief opinion, but I'll really like to hear from the others on this. They have a lot more experience. My only concern will be, are those, if you are using these other options, are they free? Are they easy to use for the others in the future? And that will be my only concern. That's that.
Okay.
What do the other think?
Yes, but in ANA we can to install in VPS, and is free. Is open source, the NAA. Yeah.
If it's open source, if it's free, if it
Yeah.
makes things better and run faster, it sounds like it's ticking all the boxes. So I don't see any problem with that, because we want you to be creative. We want you to use the most efficient tools and really think about, I'm building this for an NGO that has 2 employees, that has no coding skills. How am I going to build something that works really well and that also they can afford to run, right? So if your options work, then that'll be fantastic. That's why when we ask you to send us you saw Joanne show you the GitHub. So you'll send us the code, the pitch, the data, and everything, and there'll be some disclaimers on what resources you use, what computational resources you use, what were the platforms, because we will consider all these elements. You might have the best performing model, but you are in a rich university in Canada or in Australia and accessing many GPUs and so on. Well, we will consider that. Not that we don't want to see it, but if somebody else reaches almost similar performance, but with using their laptop, like Duoyi was saying with Modern BERT, that sounds to me like a lot of innovation to close that gap. So
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
I agree with you. I am from Latin America,
Yeah. We really thought about this, and that's why we're going to ask you for that disclaimer, and that's why our goal is not to have a benchmark on accuracy of F1 score that beats our benchmark, but rather thinking about all these different complex elements and building something innovative. And I hope that all the panels you listened to yesterday gives you an understanding of why this is not, doesn't make sense just to build a really good AI for a paper if that's not going to be used by the academia and civic society.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so the messages in the chat are very lovely. I think again, maybe we can take back the rest of the half an hour. We have one more workshop today where we're going to discuss the application visualization, and this is going to be really interesting for us because there we don't have a lot that we've done in Project AIM, so we will be really looking at how do we take all these beautiful resources and really build something useful. And again, those that are taking on that challenge, I hope by participating in these 2 challenges you understand why we're asking for this data in a particular way, why we're asking the models to be able to do this template or high-level statistics and so on, and how all of that hopefully in the future will end up contributing to this platform or application that you're building. So please join us there. We will have some really great demos from Canada, from the UK, from Germany. Really interesting things we want to show you, and again to hear your questions. Later today, we're working now on a drive where we're going to put all the resources, the description of the challenges, the participants handbook, all of this. The agenda of the AIMS hackathon is online, and as you see, we are uploading the recording as we go. So we have already all the sessions from yesterday available, and we will upload those workshops. So take your time. Those have been some very heavy days in terms of content, but I hope you've learned a lot. And we already have the data mining workshop there. So you see, we will have those there. Afterwards, I already have a few meetings organized with some of you. Once you have ideas, once you have something that you require a bit of feedback, please reach out to us. I'll be available throughout the weekend and so on to meet you, give you some ideas. But more than anything, we're curious to hear from you. What do you like to do, and how are you going to take this forward? And I hope you also heard throughout the presentation yesterday's that some of the speakers are interesting to see what you're doing. So maybe there'll be opportunities beyond this hackathon to collaborate. So I hope you see this as a great opportunity, not only for the prizes and of course to meet all these people, but there could be opportunities in the future to collaborate. And I do really, really hope you will be able to make the most out of this. So with all of those, I hope you're starting to feel really pumped up for this long weekend of hacking, and we're really excited to see what you are building. All right, that's all from me. If there is nothing else, I just want to invite you to really thank our speakers, because while we spend already quite a few hours today, we spend a lot more hours behind the scenes preparing for those challenges, and also all of them have been working for a very long time on this project, building those resources that we were able to make open source and able to give them to this hackathon and beyond to build. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for all your support. And I look forward to seeing some of you later on today. And maybe one last thank you to Sebastian and Joan, who haven't slept in 2 days because they've been with us throughout all the sessions, despite the time zone, and recording everything and making the entire event work so smoothly. So thank you, Sebastian and Joan, and I really hope you're going to have a good nap after this session.